Good evening, everyone. I, Nivedita Lahiri from Counsel Academy, welcome you to our November event on the future of education. Education is and has always been the source of enlightenment, enrichment, and awareness for generations, and has been undergoing various changes over time. For example, a big change in the mode of education, online education, surfaced in the pandemic era. Hence, there is no doubt that the future face of education will look very different from its current form. More advanced in technology and effective in imparting the knowledge to young minds. This modern technology combines the human intelligence and artificial intelligence to maximize the understanding via different routes of learning. To learn more about this wonder, it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Irfan Khan, founder and CEO of Supernova Academy, for his presentation. A quick thing before starting. If anyone has any questions about the augmented reality or virtual reality technology in education, please feel free to email to Mr. Khan. We will be sharing his contact information at the end of the presentation. Also, please comment on how you liked our event. Thank you, and let's enjoy the presentation.
Hello, everyone. This is Irfan Khan. I will be talking about a new topic, which is going to be using augmented reality in education. So essentially, some of us, you may know that augmented reality is the technology where you can actually view 3D objects in front of you and be able to interact with it. Okay, so let's look at what do we have to cover today. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is that first of all we talk about what is education, right? Because a lot of times we take it for granted that we know what education is, right? So basically it depends upon 5 different areas, as you can see. Number one, the learning environment, right? So essentially, for example, if you're taking a class online versus in person, it makes a huge difference, right? So with that said, so learning environment is very important because it has to be a clean environment. It has to be an environment where you can learn very, very quietly and be able to grasp it, right? And of course, the content is also important. For example, if you're taking a biology class, you want to make sure that the instructor is only covering the content that needs to be covered to make sure that is useful, right? And the third element here, as you can see, is the processes, right? What kind of process have they used to establish this content? How it is structured? What is the curriculum, right? And of course, the outcome is probably the most important element, which is basically what are you trying to do with this education, right? Because the thing is, the education is not effective. It will not be worth as much as if it's designed properly, right? So essentially, to summarize, the 5 elements, as we can see, are the learner, environment, content, processes, outcomes, and learner. Okay. So let's look at what are the different types of learning in general, right? So essentially, we have 3 types of learning of education. First of them is basically the most common example is the effective education, right? Which is basically what we go through from kindergarten to elementary school, all the way to middle school and high school. That is education that has been put together by a team of experts and has a curriculum for different ages and different ideas. And then the second one is called a discovery learning. As you may have seen, some of your labs or some of your things you have done, maybe inside the classroom or outside the classroom. This is where the research comes in, right? So research is primarily a disciplined inquiry where we're trying to find out something new, right? For example, if you know Albert Einstein, he basically discovered the theory of relativity, right? Which is basically huge. And there are many, Thomas Edison, for example, he discovered the light bulb. So essentially, there are many, many places and many, many scientists in the history of time that actually did some research and essentially tirelessly worked on finding a solution. Now, third one is kind of interesting because this is called compelled learning, right? So you may ask the question, what do you mean compelled? Are we forcing somebody? In a way, yes. So when we are in a classroom, for example, sometimes the instructor or the professor says that if you do, this extra credit, I'm going to give you extra grade for that, right? So basically, you're trying to get something extra. In that case, you're basically forcing yourself to do something over and above and beyond. Okay. So essentially, let's look at the modes of education. As you can see, there are many, many modes. There are primarily 12 modes, as we can see. We'll walk through them one by one, right? The first one is the most important element, which is basically called a visual element. And essentially, that is going to be the most important element. And that's what the whole education is based on in terms of augmented reality, right? So as you can see, the neuroscience has actually done research to let us know that visual learning is the most efficient way of learning, right? And also the human eye can process 36,000 visual images every hour. And by the way, this was done by research. This is not me talking about this, but this has been proven that visual learning is the most efficient way of learning, right? I mean, just imagine when we go to a movie, for example, right? After we see the movie, we come out and we try to imagine ourselves in the movie, right? So you can imagine how powerful visual learning is, right? The next one is auditory learning, which is not as efficient as visual, but basically falls right behind that. So when you listen to a tape, listen to music, for example, listen to some audio books, you're listening and at the same time you're grasping. Your mind is grasping at the same time. So basically, it's right behind visual. The next one is called tactile. You may have heard this term before or not, but essentially what it means is that you're learning by touch, right? For example, if you touch something hot, you know that you're going to burn your finger, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're touching something, you're trying to feel something, and that's how you're learning that, right? And of course, the next one is called kinesthetic, which is basically you're trying to move yourself. Basically, somebody is acting out in front of you, and essentially, what you're doing is you're trying to grasp that by using your movement sense to capture that image or capture that education, right? And following that is called sequential. So this is pretty straightforward. So essentially, the whole education system that we have is based on the sequential step-by-step process, right? So we start out with kindergarten, and then basically we take a baby step, then we go to elementary school, we take a baby step, we go to middle school, and so on and so forth, all the way to high school, college, and postgraduate, right? So all these are small steps where you reach your goal, whether to become an engineer, whether to become a doctor, a lawyer. Everybody has to go through this. Now, interesting point about sequential step-by-step or overall education is that education gives you the foundation to broaden your mind, right? That's the whole benefit. And once you take your education, a degree, you can pretty much go in any field because your mind is already, expanded, right? And of course, the next one is called simultaneous. Essentially, you're trying to combine multiple things, right? You try to bring a pictures, your sound. So this all coming together in one shot. That's simultaneous, right? The verbal, the thing, think aloud, or thinking out loud is also important because many times we call this brainstorming, right? Now, in the classroom, sometimes when the instructor, when the teacher says that, okay, let's brainstorm about why do we have, a hot, summertime and a cold in the winter time, right? It's a simple question, but as you start talking about that to yourself and to your colleagues, your classmates, you will understand that as you repeat certain things by brainstorming, you start to understand things, right? So many times when people come to you and basically they say, you know what, I'm thinking out loud. So what that means is that I'm trying to find the confidence in what I'm saying, right? I need some support from somebody, right? So that's that. And then interactive is also very important because interactive is the way we all, when you go to class, the teacher tells us to describe something, right? Or he or she teaches something and he asks a question, right? And as a student, we are answering the questions to the best of our knowledge. And by being interactive, it makes sure the audience is actually interacting with the teacher, and the teacher is just not going through the slide by slide and then finding out that nobody learned anything, right? So interactive, immersive, right? Those are the key points as we go forward towards augmented reality as well, right? Reflective, logical. Again, this is basically you by yourself, maybe in a room where you're trying to draw pictures yourself, trying to think by yourself logically, and trying to see does it make sense or not, right? The next one is called direct experience. So basically, this is called a life experience. So let's say when you travel, let's say Europe, right? You come across a different culture, different people, right? And you're absorbing these things and experiencing things, right? In that case, you're probably using multiple modes of education. You may be using visual, you may be auditory, you may be using kinesthetic, and essentially that is another way to learn things, right? People go in multiple places and try to absorb things, right? Uh, on that note, this next one is called indirect experience. So this is basically somebody directing you through demonstrations. For example, here we're showing somebody doing a CPR, right? So essentially, this is another way of learning things. For example, maybe you can go to a school play, right? And when you watch the school play, you feel emotion sometimes. Let's say if it's some kind of opera, right? You start thinking about the story and start thinking about, oh, this is something that's happening. What is that person doing, and so on and so forth. And last one is basically called rhythmic, right? This is basically, you can, if you like to sing, if you like to, dance, right? So essentially, all these are elements of learning, right? But to summarize, visual learning is the most efficient way of learning, right? Let's move on. So as you can see that within that, there's three types of education that you can come across, right? The formal education, which we all go through the school as we talked about, right? And that's the one that we go through elementary school and go into secondary school, high school, university, and so on and so forth. This is very structured. And essentially, let's say if you're planning to become an engineer, you have to take some courses related to engineering, whether it's mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering. And then once you graduate from that, you become a certified engineer, right? And then non-formal basically could be something that's home-based that you're learning, at the home and you'll be using online. I guess a good question, good answer to that also is that let's say if you're learning something at home, you may have an online class that you're taking online, and all those are non-formal because the thing is you can take anything you want if you want to learn something, right? And the last one is informal, which is basically there's no structure to that. Essentially, you basically go about, meeting friends, going online or making, going to social media. This is all part of informal education, right? So basically what we've covered is the modes of education and within that, the types of education, all right? And of course, now we're going to jump into the augmented reality portion. So some of you may have heard of virtual reality because that's more common these days. So a little brother to that is going to be the AR, which is basically augmented reality, right? So the main difference between augmented reality and virtual reality is that in augmented reality, you're partially immersive, right? So what that means is that when we use a VR or virtual reality, you're wearing goggles, right? And essentially, whatever's in the goggles is around you. That's called fully immersive. In the case of AR, you're partially immersive because you can use a mobile device to generate some objects like we show here. So the first element that we like to talk about is called a marker-based AR. So as the word indicates, what we're doing is we're trying to basically design a marker. It could be a picture, it could be a video. And by using the marker, you can actually develop a 3D model of the object. For example, in this case, we are focusing on the picture of a building. right? And automatically the augmented reality is converting that into a 3D model. Now, the beauty of this is that with this technology, you can actually open up this model in front of you on a table, just like we're doing now, and literally take your mobile device and walk around the building as if it's a real building. Isn't that amazing? For example, if you're designing, let's say if you're doing a science project, right? So let's say that you have a picture of the science project. When you go to present the science project, you can actually show everybody how it's going to look like in 3 dimensions, right? So some of us are pretty young. You're probably not familiar with 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. So 3 dimension is something that is you can see the length, the breadth, and the depth, right? That's the important thing. And essentially, what you're seeing here is a virtual 3 dimensional object of the real building, right? That's the beauty of this. All right, the next one you may be familiar with is called a markerless based AR. Now, the best example I can think about is the Pokemon Go game that we had some years ago. And in this case, what we're showing in the picture is that you can use this technology for advertising, for example, right? For example, if you want to look up, if you want to show a shopping center, you want to look at a coffee shop, and by using the GPS, which is, basically your location-based coordinates, right, based on the compass, you can actually either project something, or you can actually find out information about something else, right? So again, think about Pokemon Go, where we had the Pokemon showing up multiple places and people were following them, in a scenario, right? So this is another way to use augmented reality. All right. The last one is called a projection-based AR, which is actually very complex. So what you're seeing here is a machine that is being projected in 3 dimensions in front of this person. So the difference between the earlier one and this one is that the person is actually wearing goggles, right? But the difference is that this is not virtual reality. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. This is actually still augmented reality, but only thing what you're doing is you're using the goggles here in place of the mobile device, right? But the beauty of this technology is that you can actually project the whole object, in this case, a complex machine that you're able to project in front of you. And more importantly, you can actually run the simulated machine just by pressing the start button. Okay, so let you digest that. So essentially, let's think about this, right? Let's say that you buy a new bike, right? Or you want to buy a new bike, but before you buy it, you want to see how it operates. Imagine if you can get basically a 3D model in AR for that bike, you can actually literally put that in front of you and walk around it and maybe, even, operate it somehow. So that's the beauty of this last one. So essentially what we're saying is the combination of marker-based, markerless-based, and projection-based AR gives us a complementary spectrum to define and develop new objects, which will be great in education, right? So just quickly, the future of education, as you probably know, is that in a few years, the conventional school system may go away and it may be replaced by online learning, a combination of AR and VR. Right? So that's the future of this, right? Now, how can we use AR education, for example, right? So let's imagine that when you go to your biology class where you have dissection, for example, right? So in that case, you could potentially look at like, for example, a frog, and which has essentially showing the inside of the frog, all the anatomy, right? This is without even building anything. This is just looking at the frog and trying to understand that whole anatomy of a frog. Similarly, you can build an anatomy of a person, a human person, and be able to examine it in augmented reality. So you can see that it's a really powerful way of teaching the students. Now, so one thing I'd like to point out that AR is in a very, very infant level right now. But you might have seen AR being mentioned in Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth, right? But the serious element here is that it could be used in powerful things like education, okay? And as you can see, there are multiple branches within education, right? For example, what is the benefit, right? First of all, you're trying to get a practical and hands-on experience of the actual 3D model of the object, of the element, and be able to immerse yourself and walk around that particular object as you want, right? That's the beauty of this, augmented reality in education, right? And secondly, you can actually create development of visual models, interactive models, where you actually can project those models, whether it's a bicycle, whether it's a vacuum cleaner, whether it's iPhone. You can actually create those models virtually and be able to project them in front of you, right? That's the beauty of AR. And then, like we mentioned before, you can actually do virtual simulations. So simulation means that you're running a machine virtually without actually building the machine, right? I'll let you think about that for a second. But essentially, like we talked about before, you can literally operate a machine, a complex machine, virtually through augmented reality, right? And of course, the most element, the most, I guess the most benefit of AR is to use your mobile device, whether it's an iPhone, Android, iPad, whatever that you have, you can use that to experience augmented reality, right? And of course, as you can see, the last element here is the application of concepts. For example, let's say you're traveling somewhere, right? And you take some pictures, you come back, and you want to explore something else on that subject. So what you can do is, if you have the experience, or if you have the means, you would want to develop a simple model to observe that, right? So it's a powerful tool in education and training. Now, switching gears, the next big element is construction, right? So construction, as you can see, is a lot of work, with a lot of inaccuracies. For example, we're seeing this, little scooper, and basically they're doing the work, right? So now construction is different in the sense, because when you're starting to build a home, for example, there are many things happening, constantly, and things are changing. So you have to make decisions constantly, right? So there is always the possibility that we start doing the excavation for the foundation. You may not go to the right depth, for example. That means the foundation is not going to be strong enough, right? That's one thing. Second thing is that when you go to the site, sometimes you have to carry huge drawings with you, and there's no place to put them on the ground because everything is open. Now, as the beauty of this AR, what you can see is that the structure that's already built in a virtual model, you can actually put that in the right place and make sure that everything is according to plan, right? Now, does it solve everything? Probably not, but it will make things more accurate and more safer, right? So those of us who are thinking of going in construction, this is a great example. And as you can see, benefits are similar in construction as well. You can basically build objects beforehand, you can study them. Now, this applies to mainly construction, but also applies to other development areas, that when you start design development, in the beginning, there's no object there to visualize things, right? So let's say that you're working in a construction company, and essentially your boss tells you to show me, or show him or her, a 3D model of the building, a 3D model of the structure, right? So essentially, with this technology, you can bring up the whole model and be able to show to your boss how it's going to look like, right? That's amazing, isn't it? So again, think outside the box. Think about your science, your life sciences. Think about anatomy. So anything that's possible to show here, right? And the most important element here also is that as the design develops, right, you can go back and make those changes to the AR model, and that can be shown as the most up-to-date, accurate model. Okay. Of course, the next one, of course, as you mentioned before, medical education is going to be hugely impacted in a positive direction using augmented reality, right? So as you can show in the picture, the lady is using basically AR goggles, and with that, she's able to see the anatomy of the person, right? And the beauty of also of this is that when the patient comes in for diagnosis, and you want to basically show them something that's going on inside the body, you can use these goggles or mobile device to show them exactly where the issue is, right? Now, think about this, right? Currently, the education is being done for future doctors, but there's a very few elements, there are very few institutions that are using AR for education. So as we grow up to become doctors, engineers, lawyers, we'll get these benefits, right? And let's say if you're taking your med school right now, if you learn everything in AR, for example, as you grow and go and become a doctor, at that point, it will be very, very easy transition for you to go into medical school and basically go do your, analysis. And then once you become a doctor, you will be able to use this, some of the applications, right? So again, it's all win, win, win. So again, healthcare is very similar, right? Basically, you can create anatomy for medical students. And I guess one thing I like to point out is that with this technology, it allows the surgeons to perform virtual surgery, right, without any risk to the patients, right? Some of you may have heard about surgeries when you watch movies. You might have seen somebody getting a brain surgery, whether somebody getting a heart surgery. So with this technology, you can actually use in a virtual model to perform the surgery, right? So that's the beauty of this, right? And of course, some other elements here that are beneficial to the medical industry is that the nurses will be able to easily find, basically your intravenous injection where you can actually put that in your arm, for example. A lot of times when people come in, they cannot find this vein, and essentially that becomes very problematic. Right. So again, like I said before, we went through multiple things: education, construction, manufacturing, medical education. So bottom line is that augmented reality is one of the best technologies that we could think about, right? And on that note, just a quick note that by the year 2030, the AR market is going to be around $1 trillion, and that's a lot of money. Okay. So, and then of course, manufacturing, same thing. You can basically use your mobile device to capture, the images and be able to safely not only look at the design, but also be able to train people safely so that people don't get injured and it's a very, very safe environment, right? So similar kind of concepts here. So again, the thing you're going to see over and over again is that the beauty of having a 3D object in front of you, which is virtual, but at the same time, you're able to, move that object, whether it's a vacuum cleaner, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a bicycle, you can actually be able to experience the product with a virtual model. Okay. And basically, we talked manufacturing. So same concept here. This person is looking at a complex machinery by using the mobile device, right? So basically, we can do that very, very clearly. Now, those of us who want to go and design, this will be a great opportunity for you to think about and be able to design something and be able to visualize that way before it's built, right? So in any case, whenever we talk about design and development, there's always multiple things involved, right? There is things about accuracy of design. There's things about safety design. So all those things will be hugely benefited, right? Same thing in production operations. So I think we're getting towards the end of this slide deck. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a demo of a real 3D object in augmented reality, which is going to be, a rover, Mars rover. So some of you may have heard the Mars rover is actually a robot that was designed by NASA in conjunction with JPL, which is Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. And this particular robot was sent to Mars in year 2020, right? And it was a great achievement for science because this is the first time they were able to drop a robot with cameras. And also, in addition, it had a small helicopter that was acting like a monitor flying ahead of this particular robot, right? And the mission for this robot was to capture specimens from the surface of the Earth and it's still on Mars right now, but eventually it will be brought back. The samples will be brought back to Earth, and we'll be able to examine the Mars soil structure and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to escape from this presentation, and I'm going to bring up the other one, which is basically going to be a short demonstration. Okay. All right, so this is basically recorded by myself. So this is on our website, which is supernovaincorporate.com. You can try this yourself. So let me play that right now.
Hello. So we are going to demonstrate a couple of AR models in our portfolio, which we can discuss during the meeting. So the first thing I'm going to do is on the website, there's a page or the site called Experience Augmented Reality. So there's a couple of videos at the bottom, and then below that, there's a couple of pictures. The first one is the Mars rover. So we're going to place that in front of me so that we can interact with it. All right, here goes. So as you press on that, what happens is that you're going to see an image, and it's going to say view in your space. So we're getting there right now. So just give it 1 second. So there it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to create or press on view in your space, right? And right away, what you're going to see is the actual model of that product, right? So I can move it, I can walk around it, right? And essentially you can basically get close to it, right? And you can zoom in, and essentially you can walk close to it, right? And then look at the different components. Look how clear it is, right? So this is just one of the applications of this technology, right? So I can go close, I can look at the cameras, I can look at the different structure, I can look at the wheels. So with this technology, what we could do is, before the product is even designed, we can actually create the AR model, and could be shared by anybody across the globe. For example, if you have a team sitting in England, for example, and you are in US, right? You can actually create this AR model and be able to bring it up on a tabletop and discuss this among the team members. So it's a really powerful technology. All right, so that's that. The second one I want to share is so let me just close this one, right? And then the second one I want to share is the race car garage, right? So give me 1 second. So same thing goes here. So you go to the experience augmented reality, right? And this time we're going to go all the way to the bottom. And what we're going to do now is we're going to select the pit lane or the race car garage. Same thing. It will give us the indication that you can place in your space, right? So I did the same thing. Now the difference here is that this time it's not a mechanical product, but it's an actual structure, right? Same thing. I can zoom in, zoom out, right? I can turn it around wherever I want. Now the beauty of this structure is that actually I can walk inside as if it's a real structure, right? I can look at different elements, the shelves, right? I can look at the flooring, I can look at some of the things. For example, as you can see that we have some labels, right? So one of the things we can do in this technology is that we can create labels for the structure or the product so that people will be able to identify. So one of the great applications of the AR is in construction, right? So with construction, what we're doing is we are actually be able to visualize the product. All right, so this will be covered today in our meeting, and essentially we can talk more about that, what kind of applications can we use this for, but the technology is really wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so that was that. So let's gonna go back and finish up on our discussion, right? So essentially that's your demonstration, right? So all in all, right, to summarize, let me go back to my so to summarize, essentially, based on research, visual learning is the most effective way of learning because humans adapt, learn, and absorb things visually the best way, right? So hence, augmented reality provides that feature where people can learn in an immersive and interactive environment. And of course, last but not least, you know, it is going to bring transformation across every element of the human beings, ranging from construction, industrial, medical, manufacturing. So this is just the beginning. I really advise all the young folks that are watching this to think about how do we benefit from this and become basically the pioneers adapting to it. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you all who have attended our November event on augmented reality. Hope you have enjoyed this presentation. I sincerely thank Mr. Khan for enlightening us. Counsel Academy organizes free monthly educational events for children and adults. If interested, please subscribe to our website and YouTube channel for future news and updates. Wish you all a good night, and we look forward to seeing you at our December event.